The machine gun effect is the term used to describe being beaten over the head again and again and again with the sound of exactly the same sampled note. Now that was a particularly egregious example where every one of those cello notes was played at the same velocity. So here's a version that masks the effect to a certain degree simply by way of my having played in the part much more musically, though listen out for how particularly fake the last four notes sound. It's interesting that we can listen to the same song or a recording or even a video tutorial over and over again, but when it comes to samples that repeat very literally within a short space of time, things start to get annoying and start to sound fake real fast. And I have a theory about why this happens. I think that the ear itself has a very good short-term memory, so when the exact same sound occurs 2 or more times in a row, something in the brain goes, yeah, been there, done that, and it gets annoyed. So that's my theory. However, context does make a difference because in dance music, the exact repetition of sampled drum sounds and drum loops is hypnotic. And although it's overused, the famous machine gun snare fill is a really effective device for creating tension and lift into the next section of the song, or the next sentence of my voiceover in this tutorial. But the machine gun effect is a huge problem for realizing orchestral music that features repeated notes or ostinati, because the very literal repetitions of the sound of the notes is so mechanical, and that's exactly the opposite of what we get from real performers who never play the same note exactly the same way twice. The machine gun effect was a huge problem for older sample libraries which have only one velocity layer and where velocity only controls the volume in terms of dynamics. And I'm using just such an old library for the violins and cello sounds in this sketch, and similar to the marcato cello part from a few moments ago, the only thing making this remotely listenable is because I played the part in with enough variation in velocity to simulate accents and dynamic nuances. Now, many modern libraries are designed with features to help overcome the machine gun effect. One of them is Round Robin, where a library developer samples musicians playing each note at a particular dynamic level, but not just one note. They'll record the same note multiple times. And then the samples for every note are carefully chosen for their slight variations in timbre and pitch. And then when you play a note repeatedly, the plugin cycles through the different samples in sequence. The idea behind this scheme is to replicate the very thing I mentioned just a little while ago, that a performer will never play a note exactly the same way twice. So it sounds like a really great idea, right? Well, it's not really all that it's cracked up to be, and for as many problems as it solves, it creates new problems which are really difficult to tackle. Here's what I mean. Here's that marcato cello passage again, but this time we're going to hear it cycle through the 2 available round robin samples in this preset. With only 2 samples to cycle through in the round-robin programming of this sound, now we hear a variation on the machine gun effect, which is an alternating shifting in the timbre between the 2 available samples. This timbre cycling effect is made all the more noticeable in this example because all the notes are the same. Now, if the part was much sparser or melodic in nature, meaning that the pitches were constantly changing, the timbre cycling may never be noticeable at all. But in this context of a repeating note ostinato, the timbre cycling effect is equally as effective as the machine gun effect in revealing to our listening audience that we're using samples. Another problematic aspect of round robin is inconsistency during playback. And to demonstrate this, here's a small portion of the cello part, but this time it's going to start with a little triplet pickup. Now I'm going to play it one more time and see how the pattern got turned around? So that happened because, again, this sound cycles between two samples. So if I start playback with the first sample, which is the odd numbered sample, and I happen to end playback on the odd numbered sample, when I start playback from the top, now the cycle starts from the even numbered sample. And that means that parts realized with round robin sounds will very often sound different each time you play them back, because there's no telling where in the cycle of samples you'll be leaving off when you stop playback. Now, as a remedy for this, some sample libraries, such as East West Instruments, have a feature where you can use a CC message or a note to reset the round robin cycling to the beginning. And I've got my East West sound set up so that I hit the lowest A on my keyboard, which is A-1, and that will reset the round robin cycling. So all I have to do is play this note or enter it just before the first note in the passage where I want the cycle to reset. So here I've inserted an A-1 at the start of the pickup, and then another one right before the start of the downbeat. And this means that the cycle of samples will go 1, 2, 1 for the triplet, and then the main pattern will reset on the downbeat with the first sample. And with these reset events in place, the sound will be consistent whenever I start playback from the top. So while round robin eliminates the machine gun effect, it introduces a whole bunch of complications and a new complication of timbral cycling when playing repeated notes. So the solution there is to design instruments that have more than just 2 variations per cycle. And in fact, East West has a 6-sample round robin variation on this same Arcado cello sound, which you're going to hear now playing the full cello passage with the pickup. That's way better in that there's a lot more variation from note to note, and overall it really does sound a lot more organic and more like a real performance. But still, we face the problem of unpredictable playback. I'm going to play back just the last measure twice, and you'll see it's going to sound different both times. And now to summarize. Number 1, if your samples sound different each time you play them back, chances are you're not going insane. Chances are better that you're using round robin sounds. And if that proves to be the case, investigate if your sampler instruments have a reset feature. And if they do, then you'll want to consider inserting reset events in key places to ensure predictable playback.